I'm home.
Throws to the near side, and that's intercepted. Intercepted by Jack Jones, heading down the near sideline, and this will be a pick six for Jack Jones and a touchdown for Arizona State.
People here, when you think of Sun Devil football, you think of Sun Devil for life.
Here we go, 7 seconds. Berkovici. He's just going to air it out deep downfield, and no white shirts around. Oh, Jalen Strong! Caught for a touchdown! Jalen Strong makes the catch!
I went to Arizona State. Right. I'm a Sun Devil, man.
This is about the Valley. We need the Valley. If we get the Valley all in, the sky is the limit.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
I'm Joe Healy with devilsdigest.com.
All right, Joe, we are here just weeks away from ASU opening up fall camp. You know, we have kind of unofficially launched season 13 a week ago. Time flies when you're having fun. ASU is starting up fall camp July 31st. We have dates. They're going to be heading up to Camp T. It's starting to feel real.
Yeah, it's all coming together. We're at the 44-day mark, if I'm not mistaken. You see the clock ticking down. Yeah, we're right about within 6 weeks, so that you're getting that point where you can talk about real things about to happen.
Yeah, so last week we counted down the top 10 most important non-quarterback Sun Devils for this upcoming 2023 season. And it's about that time in our regular preseason calendar where we take a big picture look at the Pac-12, at the nation at large, and kind of really get a sense as to what kind of season is going to be shaping up. Of course, this is the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it, the last year of the 4-team playoff. So a lot of things are going on, a lot of big topics. Of course, it's not a day that goes by without Pac-12 media deal news. We'll dive into that. We'll tackle it all with the special guest returning for his 10th annual appearance, 11th overall, as he's chasing Kyle Dodd, Matt Barrie, ESPN Sports Center anchor, the studio host, and the Thursday night play-by-play voice of ESPN College Football. Always great to catch up with Matt. A lot of good stuff that we'll dive into there. But, Joe, we made a big announcement last week, and just in case anybody was under a rock and happened to miss it, what's happening on August 4th?
August the 4th, Friday evening, 6 o'clock, the Graduate Hotel in Tempe. We will be there, live show for the very first time. You don't want to miss that. So we've already had an incredible response as far as the folks who were planning to attend. So jump on that. If you can see our posts, and we'll certainly be sharing the information as time goes on for links to RSVP. That's going to help you get reminders about the event, that sort of thing. Come on out. We're putting together the guest list. We're going to have some good ones no matter what it ends up being, but it's going to be an awesome time. And because at that point we'll be just a few weeks away from game time itself. So things will be really, really ramping up and heating up just like they are everywhere here in the Phoenix area. So come on, join us. If you have an RSVP, be sure to do that. And then join us on Friday, August the 4th itself. It starts at 6 p.m. You can go ahead and certainly get there early. We'll be there setting up. You can come and hang out and get yourself a nice little seat. Then also be sure to stay afterward, because the party doesn't end when the mics go off.
Absolutely not. Sun Devil Summit. You probably have heard the stories in hushed tones because they're pretty legendary over the years. Since I believe that the first one was 2013 pre-Wisconsin, right?
Wisconsin, the old Santan Brewery downtown Chandler, just created from a bunch of us who BS with one another, on social media, as we still do, of course, to this day. But there are a bunch of us we've never really met in real life. And it was a huge game. So people were in town, from out of town, that sort of thing. So we had a real good time at that one. And that obviously led to a amazing win. And we had a few more that year, very memorable season. So it just became kind of its own thing. It's been a little bit since we've really done one, but it's a good time and place to be back.
Yeah, we've always done them the evening before a big game. So, and those usually translate to wins, 2014 Notre Dame is another one that jumps out. So maybe perhaps doing it before a season as a whole, that good luck will permeate throughout, and year one under Dilly will go really, really well. what is also continuing to go really, really well for Kenny Dillingham so far in year one, recruiting. Since our last episode that we talked about the batch of 5 new recruits, one more has been added. Linebacker Sire Gaines, a 3-star prospect out of California, 6'1", 200-pounder guy who's a very well-regarded recruit in the state of California, obviously a talent-rich state in its own right. That brings ASU's 2024 tally to 17 at the moment as the time of this recording, 35 in the national rivals team rankings. Pretty good.
Yeah, not so bad. And that's another one that's kind of been a recent scenario lately where one of the top competitors for his services was the University of Arizona. So a win within a win there. Boise State, San Diego State, of course, near where he's from, Washington State, a bunch of others from the Pac-12, also the Mountain West that were recruiting him, a top 50 player overall in the state of California. So someone that could be ready-made because of the level of competition there. So you talk about that quantity of players on the recruiting list so far, that's pretty impressive, pretty remarkable. And we'll see how things go and what the philosophies are, because it's still that new normal of the transfer portal. And as we talked about last week with the, doing away with the limitations for incoming classes. So there are a lot of different ways you can handle how you acquire talent. Some might go light on the high school recruiting and really focus on the transfer portal. Some might have enough built in in stock to begin with that they can maybe go a little heavier on the high school side of things so they can develop for the future. We'll see how that all pans out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to track over the coming months, heading into the early signing period in the middle of December. And you mentioned just with the restrictions on the class size being that extended for another year, and just having those restrictions be tossed aside. We saw what ASU was able to do, bringing over 50 newcomers. So having that ability to bring in new blood, as Kenny Dillingham and staff really kind of rebuild and revitalize the son of a program, is going to be a really big addition. So it'll be interesting to track that. And of course, we'll be with you each and every week for the duration through signing day as we break everything down. But of course, as we're recording now on this Tuesday evening, Friday, Pac-12 Media Day. It's going to be in Vegas. I'm going to be heading up there. It'll be interesting to talk to the coaches, players from all across the conference, of course. And that, of course, is the one of the signs that you're going to get a lot of preseason lists that are coming out. Some of the watch list, which basically, like, if you play that position and you're returning, you're on a watch list. The Pac-12 today released their all Pac-12 preseason first and second teams. Sun Devils, for the first time since these lists started coming out in 2018, not a single selection. That's a little curious. I think it does speak, Joe, to the overall lack of respect, and perhaps people not paying attention. They just see a program 3 and 9, new staff coming in, which is understandable in a way. But as I think people who cover this program each and every day and know the kind of the ins and outs going on, a little surprising. 4 Sun Devils did get honorable mentions, though. Running back Cam Scatabo, tight end Jalen Conyers, defensive back Ro Torrance, and special teamers Slater Zellers, ASU's long snapper, came over from Cal. So amongst a couple of these things right here, that's some serious Elijah Badger erasure. I mean, he was a top, at worst, top 4 receiver in the conference a year ago, and to not make first, second, or honorable mention, among some other snubs that we can gripe about, but that's just shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some talented receivers, a handful of 1,000-yard receivers that are returning. You have a few, or at least one like a Dorian Singer who's switched, to a more powerful program. So if he did what he did, where he did it, to now play with the Heisman Trophy winner, and for them to lose some stars at wide receiver is a good formula for a guy like that to be successful there. So some of the first and second teamers, some of those slots fit because they have some really gaudy numbers, talented players, but numbers that stand off the page of, okay, how can you deny a guy that had 1,000+ yards a year ago? But yeah, to have absolutely no sort of recognition, that's wild to me. Similarly, as far as tight ends are concerned, I mean, you've got Keithy coming back. I know he's the first teamer, so there are some very good tight ends, but Conyers, I expect him to be at certainly a higher level than this sort of accolade, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I think then it is a preseason, as you'll hear from Matt Barrie. These lists are generally kind of worthless, just kind of media talking points. But it'll be interesting to see just how populated these first and second team and honorable mention lists are. 4 months down the road when we were talking about what the season that was, because guys like Badger, Conyers, Scatabo, I think some other players on defense have a chance to really kind of make a name for themselves. We'll dive into the fall camp preview next week. So, but yeah, just keep in mind that the national and even regional media are still overlooking the Sun Devils, and we'll see if how vindicated they prove to be with the season ahead. Now, as mentioned, that Pac-12 Media Day is coming up this Friday in Vegas, and one of the reports now then kind of also jives with something that Ray Anderson told me a couple months ago. No news on the media deal is expected at Media Day. It's looking like it might continue to be later in the summer. Ray Anderson told me that he expects July, perhaps even August timeframe. Continuing to track, it seems, and the reporting today from ESPN, amongst other outlets, was that the Pac-12 now has some bidders entering in that perhaps weren't present in recent months or hadn't been at the same level. So making some time, trying to go get that best deal. We'll see. But man, I'm just when I cannot hear the words media deal anymore, that'll be a good day.
It seemed like there was, I think, at least had a positive tone to it. I mean, I know that there were those statements about it, not being announced at the media day, but there were some that seemed at least generally encouraging. I mean, this is just something that put such little stock between this and the whole, San Diego State, will they, won't they kind of thing. I'm just at the point where I'm about to let it just unfold because it seems like you're getting new and different or poor information. Like it's coming from all angles. And when it works itself out, it'll work itself out.
Yeah. It's real interesting to see like kind of the media that is kind of a day in, day out covering the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 footprint. Your John Wilner's, John Canzano's striking a more optimistic tone versus some of the more national media. CBS reporter out there seems to be kind of the mouthpiece for the Big 12 and their realignment rumors, and any kind of positive movement the Pac-12 seems to have was kind of immediately undercut. It's weird. It's the media games, but the Pac-12 should be getting a deal at some point in the future. When? Who knows? I don't know. I tend to think that it'll probably be comparable, if not maybe a little bit better than the Big 12, but we'll see. I mean, just as the world turns, it's the ongoing soap opera, but it is what it is. Whether it's the ESPN, Fox, Apple TV, CW, wherever, we'll watch some football.
I mean, literally anything would be better. I mean, absolutely anything. Just something where, goodness, if you can just pay a streaming service $10 to $20 a month, cancel it if you want to cancel it, get it back if you want to get it back. I think you're in good shape there. It's a simple type of thing. It's just been so far behind the times as far as how you can function within basic TV and providing that to your fan base, and especially to a new fan base. It's time to get that part of it over with and kind of move into the 21st century a little bit.
I'm just hoping, why don't they just roll out something like MLB TV or NFL Sunday Ticket or something? Just pay a flat fee for your team or whatever tiers you want. You get them all and just from one. I don't know. Maybe it's just going back to bundling the cable days. Who knows? It's all cyclical. Time's a flat circle. In any event. So before we dive into the Matt Barrie interview and then our look ahead at the national and Pac-12 football landscape for 2023, Joe, some news in the baseball front. Luke Hill, the starting shortstop for your Sun Devils, a guy I've been pretty complimentary of and was very impressed with his debut season coming over from Louisiana and from day one being a starter, jumped in the portal on the last day and announced his commitment to Ole Miss. Willie Bloomquist did not take kindly to that. He did not hold back. And this is something that you really don't see a head coach of a major program kind of going off. The quote, and I want to make sure I get it correct here, said, "I know their makeup and they were not happy with how it went down. Not the fact that he's gone, not the fact that he transferred. It's just how it went down. A matter of fact, a lot of them think we're going to be much better without him, minus the attitude that at times showed its head with him." That's candid comments from a pissed off head coach. Something that I don't know.
You can see multiple sides of it. I mean, Willie's a competitor. We know that. I mean, as great as you could ever want, and sometimes that's hard to push down, and especially if you happen to feel betrayed. Like I certainly have no idea, the behind the scenes type of stuff as far as what those were directly referring to. And yes, you can certainly, there are good and bad ways to transfer from a program. I mean, that's just the simple fact of it. And I don't know the reality of what exactly happened here. They're waiting to the 11th hour. I'm not necessarily going to, completely beat someone over the head, for that sort of thing. It's a very difficult decision to make. So there are ways that sort of thing can go about. I mean, these things sound a little bit reminiscent to some of the actions that we saw after Jaden Daniels decided to transfer. It can really get under the skin of your teammates if you leave the wrong way or leave it all. I mean, I think that a lot of them are pretty understanding for the most part. Hey, if you got to find a better position for yourself, better spot for yourself, then hey, go do that. So if the departure happens unceremoniously, then yeah, that can rouse people up. Like I said, I have zero personal idea. Like when I saw that first, when I heard about the transfer, that was surprising. Then obviously the quotes and things today were surprising as well. But I feel like maybe some of us, myself very much included, felt like this was almost spoken to existence months ago, because that was honestly like the player on the team. Because nowadays you got to look, all right, who are the young guys that will use ASU as a stepping stone? Luke Hill from Baton Rouge, that would have made a lot of sense. Now, obviously, LSU national championship team, super loaded, but going to the SEC to play for a team that just won a national championship a couple of years ago, that's a formidable program itself, even though I know they struggled quite a bit this past year, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting deal. But again, on one side, it is rare that you hear a coach be that candid about things. On one side, I don't mind a guy sticking up for his team if he feels that that's the right thing to do, and that's a decision that Willie had to make. So that can resonate in good and bad ways. It can resonate in good ways in the sense of he's sticking up for his clubhouse. He's sticking up for his guys. And when you're trying to get a tight-knit group of guys and get this thing turned around, that can be valuable. Now, obviously, that's something that can have a slippery slope to it in this day and age of a lot of transfers. So, yeah, that was interesting to see. But like I said, I truly can understand both sides of it. I don't completely blame him for it, and don't mind him sticking up for the clubhouse. But yeah, it's just yet another perilous tale of the transfer portal and what that all does.
Yeah, and it's interesting, especially given that Kenny Dillingham addressed the media a day ago and was also talking about kind of the similar things in terms of NIL, the approach. And I think there's a nice compare and contrast opportunity here. I think Kenny handled it great. And he talked about how he's not, obviously you can't use an NIL as an enticement, although it's college football, college sports. But, those are the rules. But, the focus for Kenny is just, rewarding the players who come here, put in the work to be rewarded with NIL. Willie, his comments today really kind of had like an old man yelling at cloud type of vibe to me. And then I think the comments specifically about Luke Hill, as you said, Joe, I do think you got to stand up for your clubhouse. I just think that some of the word, the tone, and the things that I don't think it's a good look for a head baseball coach. And, perhaps, it's a passionate topic, and you lose a guy, a budding star, in the situation that kind of things unfolded on the last day, no less. As you mentioned, there's kind of three sides to every story. One, in this case, Luke, Willie, and then probably somewhere in the middle is a truth and what really shook out. But it just, I don't know. It just kind of really when you saw what Willie had to say and how he said it today versus what Kenny said a day ago, a little interesting. But we'll see what happens. This is a baseball program that, as we talked about all spring long, had some good moments and then a terrible, disappointing finish, and to lose a budding superstar at shortstop going back home, which is understandable at this time. And you're in the NIL era, if you're a program like ASU, you're going to have some problems keeping some talent that's kind of perhaps from those traditional baseball regions. But we'll see what happens. What kind of fallout this has, if this kind of reaction galvanizes the clubhouse, maybe turns off any potential recruits. We'll see. But in any event, Ole Miss got themselves a good infielder, and ASU's got some questions to answer this offseason. But Luke Hill is not the only member of this Sun Devil baseball program that has left since our last show.
Yeah, and I think this was just even announced today as well. A couple changes in the coaching staff with Travis Buck. He is now with Loyola Marymount, and that's something that I think just kind of made its way on Twitter. It didn't seem like there was a bunch of buzz coming through the shoots about it. Coaching staff issues in college baseball are very interesting with, just the things that they can and can't do. So would have been wonderful to see T-Buck stick around. Obviously, he's a program legend. have a ton of respect for that guy. And so hopefully if this helps his career trajectory, puts him better in, short and long-term position, then hey, go for it. Now, adding to the staff, Anthony Gillage, if I'm getting it right, and pardon me if I'm not, comes to Arizona State with a unique resume. Former head coach of Central Arizona, and he's a multiple-time national champion coach there. So I mean, this is someone that's got some major chops in that regard, and that's a junior college that has produced quite a bit of talent, not only to ASU but elsewhere. So that's some experience and some success at the community college level that comes down at Arizona State.
All right, joining the program now, the 10th year. I mean, we got a nice round number anniversary here, but the 11th appearance overall, which is a key number because it ties him with Kyle Dodd. He's, of course, you know him from Sports Center, ESPN's college football, and Thursday night play-by-play announced the one, the only, the great ASU alum himself, Matt Barrie. Matt, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
When you send these out, when you hit me up to do the annual interview, you think it's another year, and then you hit me up and you say, wow, this is the 10th year doing it. And it's amazing when you think about all of the discussions that have been had in the last 10 years about Arizona State football. Watching your guys' growth has been incredible to where you guys are now. I will beat Dodd at some point, even if I come on here for 5 minutes every other week during the season to make sure I could widen my gap with him. But all is good, and I'm looking forward to breaking down ASU, the Pac-12, and what we've got coming up this season.
Absolutely. So let's go back just a few months. Obviously, the end of a very difficult season for the Sun Devil football program. A coaching change is made. And then a familiar name, Kenny Dillingham, is named as the next face and leader of Sun Devil football. When you heard that happen, what were the first thoughts in your head?
Yeah, look, just some of the conversations that as a part of behind the scenes and really understanding what it is that Arizona State football needed after Herm. And, it's an interesting phase of where ASU is now as a program. If you go back to 19 and kind of the development of that young team, if you go to the COVID year in 20, that young team was growing up. And then if you look at that team in 21, it was the most talented team in the Pac-12. They were more talented than USC. They were more talented than Oregon. They were more talented than Utah. And at that time, I think we all felt that we were on the cusp of something great with the recruiting rankings and everything going on post-COVID. But then the investigation hit, and you're thinking, well, where are we now? What's going to happen? Where is this program? And I remember talking to someone, we were up, I think it was 21-7 at the half at Utah in 21. You win that game, you're in the Pac-12 championship. And maybe we're not having a conversation about Jaden transferring and all these other transfers, Chip Tranum and everybody leaving the program, Ricky Pearsall. And from that moment, from halftime of 21 against Utah until what ended up culminating in the entire coaching staff getting fired and Herm losing his job, I haven't seen a program go through a fall like that when everything looked and appeared to be so good. And so that gets me to the Kenny Dillingham point where I was very vocal with people that I needed to be vocal with about what kind of job I thought this was, what kind of job this fit, and who needed to be leading this program going forward. I said it a million times to anyone who would listen. I didn't care for an established coach from a big program that had been fired. I didn't want that. I personally didn't think that was the right fit. Well, why? Because typically these guys that were at top flight programs, and you could probably deduce who I'm talking about by saying some of the biggest programs in the country to get fired. When they get fired from a huge job, they're still not over it. And we saw it with Kevin Sumlin in Arizona. He had Texas A&M. He was getting the number one recruit and quarterback in the country every year. Well, that wasn't good enough. He got fired. He wasn't ready to succeed at Arizona. He wasn't over getting fired at Texas A&M. And so a lot of these big-time coaches that coach these top-flight programs, they just want to get back in. All right, well, what's your connection to ASU? Nothing. What's your connection to the Valley? Nothing. It's just a job for me to get back in. I didn't think that's where Arizona State needed to go. And every time you'd sit there and you would talk to some alum, we would text, we would figure it out. Every time you started pointing out what ASU needed, connection to the university, a young coach that can identify with these young players, someone who could literally look you and me in the eye and say that this is my dream job, someone that's not a threat to bail, any of this stuff. And it kept coming back to Kenny Dillingham. And Herm was a risk. There's no doubt about that hiring, that there was a risk. I think we would all agree there were some moments in there that were trending really, really well. And ultimately, the pro model, it didn't work. In fact, it failed miserably. And so that risk begot a risk that ASU had no choice but to take. And Kenny will be the first one to tell you, he's 33 years old. He's the youngest coach in FBS. He's never been a head coach before. In fact, he's never coached on the sidelines in college football. But that's the risk that this program needed to take because of where we are right now, not only as an Arizona State football program big picture, but where we are in college football in general, which is NIL, youth, recruiting, and really honing in on what you need to build a program. And I'll say this about Kenny, and it's one of the things that I didn't think the prior staff did well. And I was vocal about it to Herm quite a bit. You need, and Kenny, this is Kenny's mantra, activate the Valley. I'm sick and tired of working on college football Saturdays at ESPN and doing highlights all day and naming 5 or 6 kids that grew up in Arizona that are playing in the SEC or the Big Ten. And I think that's what you needed, a guy that was going to say, you know what, we're going to build a wall around our state. We're going to build a wall around our valley. We're going to get the talent from Scottsdale, Saguaro. You know, maybe because Dillingham went to Chaparral, we can get a couple of them too. But we're going to do that because we're going to make ASU Arizona's hometown team. And so it's a really long answer to your question. But I think when you look at checking a box for everything that Arizona State had to do, you didn't need to go get Tom Herman. You didn't need to go get some of these other coaches that had experience. You needed a coach who could learn and understand the risks of this job and grow with it. And that's what we got in Kenny.
Yeah, obviously has those local ties are pretty powerful, not just to the Valley, to the university, and you can tell the passion is there anytime you talk to him. But one of the guys that is the only guy that was retained on his staff is a guy that I know the last time that we talked, you spoke pretty glowingly about the job that he was doing and under some very difficult circumstances. And Sean Aguano, another guy that's like just really dialed in and piped into the Valley, the scene, and obviously the job that he's done here at Arizona State in the last few years. How much of an impact do you think, and how big and important was it that Sean Aguano was retained?
I would say of all the things Kenny did going into it, of all the things he did to ingratiate himself to the fan base, I think number one was retaining Sean Aguano. That was number one. Because Aguano was put in an impossible position, an absolute impossible position. He inherited a team that all but quit against Eastern Washington. Is that who it was? Eastern Washington, the embarrassing loss?
Michigan.
Eastern Michigan.
Chris Creighton's doing good things up there.
Yeah, Chris Creighton does have that thing going. But you had a team that basically just, they quit. And so you'd have to now inherit a team that's under investigation. You don't know where their heads are. And you find a way to make them believe. And one of the biggest things in college football, it's completely different in the NFL for that reason. You're in a room with 18 to 22-year-olds that are now getting NIL, that are now basically wealthy college students. But at the end of the day, they still got to believe. And Aguano somehow did it. And he fixed it. The record didn't indicate it, but he fixed the morale as good as you can do it. And he won the hearts of a lot of people in the Valley and a lot of people nationally. And so Kenny had to say, you know what? I'm the head coach, and I know you were the interim coach, but you mean everything to this program and to this area. You're coming in my bunker, and we're going to do this. And so I think retaining him was the best thing that Kenny did to start off his tenure.
And then in the 7 months since then, obviously he has a great press conference, but the value of winning a press conference is pretty minimal. But of course, makes the decision to keep Sean Aguano, assemble a pretty good staff, got some good recruiting chops on there as well. But over the last 7 months, when he's actually got to start doing some head coach stuff, he's got to start the process of rebuilding this program. What things have kind of jumped out to you, or perhaps even impressed you a little bit over the course of now, once he was in seat and getting into the meat of the job?
So that he knew going in, like he wasn't shy about it. It's people he talks with, and you guys have seen it out there. The roster had to be completely flipped. It had to be completely rebuilt, and that's not an indictment on the prior staff because the talent was here, but they transferred. And so when you lose a quarterback that's going to be a Heisman candidate in the SEC, when you lose a guy like Ricky Pearsall, when you lose some of these guys that were on the roster and you had no depth because you weren't recruiting off, you didn't have any depth. There was an exodus. You had to come in and flip the roster. And so the first thing, and mind you, Kenny's done this at other place before. Florida State had a complete roster flip that he was a part of. So he's seen the bones of how it's done. So I think the first thing for him was getting in here and bringing in the talent. And obviously retaining Elijah Badger was huge. Jalen Conyers, huge. Like these are some top flight players that I think got hosed in all Pac-12 media, the all Pac-12, but whatever. That's a preseason for the media nerds to talk about. It doesn't matter in the big picture. Go play. You'll be on the all Pac-12 when it counts. But you had to go flip the roster. And so he did that, I think, as good as he could under the circumstances he was dealt. What I am loving that he's doing, and this entire staff is doing, look at the 24 recruiting class. I mean, they are so ahead of the game in the 24 recruiting class. Some recruiting services have them ranked somewhere in the low 30s or high 30s, low 40s. And so he's getting ahead on that and plugging holes in the transfer portal. Getting Rashada was such a big deal for this university because we know Jaden's story. I know you covered it extensively here on this podcast. But what you had to do is you had to put out there that it's okay to commit to Arizona State. And I would tell people in interviews about when they would ask me about ASU football. And I said, guys, what are people in the Valley? Sky has fallen with this investigation. It's not. Like, look at Tennessee. Tennessee committed far worse than, as I understand, what Arizona State's up for. And they were number one last year for 2-3 weeks in the college football playoff rankings. You can sustain success while getting an $8 million fine, reduction of scholarships throughout the year. But it was COVID visits. Like there was no need for the attention that got put on this the way that it did to put a negative connotation around Arizona State football. And for Kenny to come in step one of his tenure and make ASU football exciting again and have people excited about it again so quickly after what just happened, to me, I think that's the most impressive thing I've seen. End the narrative of you can't come play at Arizona State. End the narrative that positive things aren't going on. Let's do this together. Let's be young. Let's be fun. Let's make mistakes together and build this thing what we know it can be. And I'll say this. I was on social media the other day, and it started going around. I don't know if it was on ESPN Classic. I don't know where it was airing. But that Notre Dame-Arizona State game when ASU – now, I'm going to say this. ASU was ranked 9th coming into that game against Notre Dame, ranked 10th. Sun Devil Stadium was sold out. And some of these current players were tweeting it. Like, wow, that's amazing. It can be done. That wasn't that long ago. And so he's got people believing in that mindset. And I think for me, that was the most important first step as head coach of Arizona State is let people know that it's going to be okay with Arizona State football. And I think he's done that.
And one of the guys that you mentioned that was kind of an early win for Dillingham was Jaden Rashada, the elite quarterback recruit, deciding to come back home, play in his father's footsteps in Tempe. But he joins a quarterback room that already has the Notre Dame transfer Drew Pine, but of course the returning starter Trenton Bourguet, the Arizona homegrown kid, had some good moments last year and coming off, and his story, of course, from walk on now to the starting job. But now he looked good in spring, but obviously a lot of things can happen in the fall, and especially once fall camp gets going. What did you see from Bourguet in terms of his leadership of this offense now coming in for a new regime? And what do you think needs to happen for him to keep the job, but not only to keep the job, but also to have success in the season ahead?
I'll tell you this. I want to start with Drew because I think Drew Pine's a hell of a quarterback. and this is my 10th appearance. You and I have talked about transfer quarterbacks before numerous times, and they haven't really gone well. But I think Drew Pine's different, and I think he's a really good player. But I'll say this, and I've told multiple people this. I even told Kenny this. I don't think Trenton Bourguet is going to go away. I don't think that he's going to show up to practice and give a damn about Drew Pine coming in, who's a highly rated recruit, and then this 4 or 5-star everything and Rashad. I don't think he cares. And I use this comparison lightly because he's my favorite Arizona State player of all time, and I think he's one of the greatest Sun Devils of all time. There's something about this 16 that reminds me of the last 16 and Jake Plummer, because you just get the sense all he wants to do is compete and win. He was a walk-on. No one wanted him. No, walk-on. He's got 4 and 5 stars ahead of him on the depth chart, or on the depth chart with him. And those are the guys. Those are the guys that you want to win with. Because I'll tell you this, when Emory got hurt last year and Trenton came in, I probably had 5 people within the ESPN college football ecosystem texting me asking, who the hell is this guy? This guy's great. You need to start Bourguet. You need to start Bourguet. You need to start Trenton. That's what he does. And I think the quarterback competition's going to be fierce. I don't think any fans should anticipate anything out of Rashada this year. I don't want that. I think he's got some developing, some growing into his body. I think there's some stuff that Kenny can do with him that'll benefit him down the road. I think this is a Drew Pine, Trenton Bourguet race. And that's all I'll say. I think they're in a great position because I think I'd go to bat with Drew Pine right now. But I love 16. There's just something about him that takes me back to yesteryear, of that he's a guy that's just going to get the offense and he's going to distribute the ball. He's going to make this thing work. And look, any coach will tell you this, Spread. Kenny's not going to decide who the starting quarterback is. The team will. You'll know immediately when they come out of Camp T, or as we get closer to the season, it's going to be obvious. It's going to show itself in practice. And so I think either of these kids are going to do something good in this offense. So I would say, honestly, the quarterback position in Arizona State, it's healthy.
Regardless of who wins that job, they got a bevy of really good targets, probably none more dangerous than tight end Jalen Conyers. You alluded to earlier, the preseason all Pac-12 teams came out. His name wasn't on there. I mean, it was an honorable mention, but what we saw him do over the second half of last season when the offense decided to start incorporating the tight end a little bit, great things happened. He looked phenomenal during spring, like he leveled up. Where do you think that Conyers kind of stacks up perhaps nationally? Obviously, you got the Brock Bowers of the world getting deservedly getting a lot of the national attention, and Conyers right at this point is a little under the radar. Do you think he has the ability to kind of make a national name for himself this fall?
Yeah, and I kind of like here. I tell players this a lot, or when you're talking with coaching staffs, I like the guys that don't get attention. Well, why? Because most players crave attention. And anybody who watched Jalen Conyers play football knows that when the kid's got the ball in his hands, he's special. And so these guys need to not worry about the attention they're not getting now, because you make plays and you score touchdowns and you make highlights and you win football games, the attention's going to find you. It just is. It's the attention's job to find you. It's our job at ESPN on a college football Saturday to find the good highlights. And at the end of the day, yeah, he's going to be one of the best, if he's not already, one of the best tight ends in the country. He sure as hell is going to be one of the best in the Pac-12. And that's going to play itself out. These preseason lists, they're for media. They're for us it's talking season. I've had a different SEC coach with me on SportsCenter every day this week from SEC Media Days. What are we doing? We're talking. We're asking them preseason questions. Well, when Saturday hits, you're going to know who the best players are in the country. Same with Elijah. Listen, he just needed to grow into his speed and understand what it was like to play college football. Now, if he gets it, forget it. There's a lot of guys on this team. If they just get it, forget it's the talent is raw. It's kind of like our head coach, right?
Yeah.
It's a raw talent. You see it. I mean, I watched every 27 minutes of his press conference yesterday. I know what game he's playing. It's a game we all need to play. And so he's the tight end. He's going to be special. And if I'm a quarterback, I've said this a million times to talking ball with people. Tight ends are a quarterback's binky. It's the best friend. We see in the NFL with Mahomes and Kelsey. When I was in Dallas traveling with the Cowboys, Romo and Witten. I mean, there's just always a good chemistry between quarterback and tight end. ASU's got that in Conyers.
So as you alluded to a little bit earlier, Tennessee finally learned kind of the penalties that would be handed down to them. It's been about over 2 years since ASU first learned that the investigation was going on to their COVID period, recruiting infractions. Still have no real idea in terms of what kind of timeline the NCAA and their glacial pace is going to kind of come forth with any kind of advancements. When all is said and done, what do you think is going to happen to the Sun Devil program as a result of these allegations, and how much do you think that might hinder the progress and the work of Kenny Dillingham?
It's so hard to say. Look, if I knew what the NCAA was thinking, I'd be a billionaire. I would say, look, I know some of the conversations that have been had. I know some of the questions that have been had. I know who they've spoken to. Look, I think here's what I'll tell you, that I will give the NCAA credit for this. Not putting Tennessee on a postseason ban was a really good thing. Because what does that do? That impacts the players that are there and had nothing to do with it. The best thing that ASU did during this investigation was they gutted the assistant coaching staff pretty quick for 2 years. And Herm was really the last one to go. And so ASU, from an administrative standpoint, handled the coaching thing, right? Players have exited out. I'm sure you guys have the number because you're doing it every day. I would bet, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, there's maybe 10 guys from a Herm Edwards roster from a couple of years ago, maybe.
Yeah, it's something like it. I mean, just this offseason alone is about 50 newcomers. And so, yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's not a big number.
So this thing's been turned over is what I'm getting at. So if the NCAA is doing their job, which, again, is debatable sometimes, look at what the infractions were. Look at where the program is now. I would imagine there's going to be some sort of monetary fine. Again, I don't know, but there's going to be some sort of, just going off other punishments. Some monetary fine. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be as much as Tennessee. $8 million basically equates to maybe 1 or 2 bowl games of income that you get from a bowl. And probably a little bit of a scholarship reduction. But end of the day, I mean, we just need to move on. And I think that it goes back to an answer I had earlier about one of the positive things about Kenny is Herm and those guys couldn't recruit during this investigation. They just couldn't. No one was like, I'm not going there. And somehow Kenny got people to believe that you still could come here and play football. And I would hope the NCAA would rule soon, because the NCAA is losing a lot of juice within the college football ecosystem because of where this sport's headed.
NIL obviously has reshaped the college sports landscape in general. And of course, ASU's had its struggles, kind of fits and starts, and trying to get involved in that game. And Kenny Dillingham, from the introductory press conference, started the rallying cry of activating the Valley and kind of getting the donor, the base, the alumni base, the Valley at large to get behind this program. And some comments he made yesterday in terms of just wanting to use that as an enticement. Or for the players that are already here, but not in a recruiting sense, obviously, but just, he wants that if the players come out here, they put in the work and they succeed, he wants, the maximum amount of money to come their way from the local businesses, from the Activate the Valley kind of efforts. As a local guy, you understand this Valley very well. What does the Sun Devil program, and it's kind of the fan base, the community as a whole, need to do to kind of close the gap that in the NIL space that ASU currently faces?
Yeah, that's such a tough one, because you never want to tell people how to spend their money or donate their money, because everybody works hard for it. I know what goes on at these programs down south. I know what happens up at the big timers in the Big Ten. I'm around it all the time with my job, and it's different. I mean, it's much different at USC than it is at Arizona State. And so you have to tap into businesses and other ways for these players to be compensated for their work and their hard work and their dedication. Look, if these guys are dedicated to my university, they're dedicated to your university, they're dedicated to your state, then there should be some dedication in return. ASU just doesn't have these tycoons that some of these other programs do. They just don't. I mean, Texas A&M's got an oil tycoon at every. You can hit a 9-iron and find another oil tycoon. ASU just doesn't have that. Got to get creative with it, and I think that they will. I think Arizona State will get very creative in the NIL space to find a way to compensate these kids to where there's an incentive to stay. I know of a couple kids that transferred. It was all money. Hey man, I got to take care of my family. School X is offering me this. I got to go. Well, yeah, you do. And so we can just get it to a point where you're offering the kid enough to be happy. It'll go a long way. Cause look, I know Arizona has all 4 pro sports organizations. I mean, there's a lot to do out there, but man, there's something about that town when ASU's going. And I hope some ASU alum, some of the guys that I went to school with, one of them, he's got a last name of a very prominent car dealership in the Valley. He could probably take care of a couple guys, but it's not going anywhere. How do you perfect it? That remains to be seen.
That kind of leads to my next question. So obviously it's currently like the Wild West and has been for a couple of years. A few states have legislation at various stages to perhaps, try to impact the NIL sphere in their particular borders. Overall, we make Matt Barrie the czar of college football. What kind of measures are restrictions, regulate? What are you doing on the NIL space to try to maybe corral things a little bit more in terms of the current just anything goes chaotic landscape?
Man, it's going to be so hard to get it back because people were so eager to get this out and yelling and screaming about, there needs to be compensated. No one ever argued that the players should be compensated, but there was a way to do it. And the NCAA screwed this up to a level unthought of when now here we are. They could have addressed this years ago and didn't, and now we are where we are. And so there's numerous ways to do it, but then it goes into the conversation we have about where's college football headed. I think there's about 60 teams or so, 60 schools rather, that make a lot of TV revenue from being in a Power 5. Well, could you take that Power 5 TV money or whatever some of the income is and fairly divvy it up amongst the players so the players are getting a cut of the money coming in? Well, then they have to be employees, and there's that whole fight with it. It just got the fact that they got to get Congress involved lets you know that someone did something pretty stupid. And so I just don't know how you regulate it because it was going on before this, right? There was money exchanging. It's college football. It's been happening forever. But now it's not under a table. It's like, hey, come to my car dealership and sign a couple of ball caps. And for that, I'll give you $2 million. Oh, by the way, you still got to come play football at X. So it needs to get fixed. It needs to get regulated somehow. I don't know that answer because at this point, I mean, if you're Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, well, he's an Auburn alum. What if he just said, hey, you know what? There's this quarterback that is in California, and I don't know that he's doing this, using him as an example because he's such a big timer. I'm going to put him in an Apple commercial and give him unlimited iPads. And we don't, who else has that? Only Auburn, because they've only got to see one CEO of Apple. So it drives us nuts how out of hand this got. And I just hope at some point there's a way to bring it back in enough to make it to where it's fair for some schools like Arizona State, who's going up against USC, who's got deep pockets, Oregon and Phil Knight and Nike. They're one of the best at NIL. So it's tough. And I just don't know at this point what you can do until some really smart people get in a room and figure it out.
So obviously one of the big things that's going on kind of existential level for ASU is the Pac-12 and its current ongoing saga of the media deal. Reporting today says that there will be no announcement of a media deal or any kind of update this Friday's Pac-12 Media Day. That kind of goes in line with when I sat down with Ray Anderson back in May, he said that he expects a deal perhaps later in the summer, even into August. But at this point, really, who knows? How worried are you about the long-term viability and survival of the Pac-12?
Oh, I mean, with this day and age, I'd be stunned if it's around for another 5 years. I mean, you just lost your biggest brand in USC. UCLA went with them. You can't tell me one of these other power conferences is trying to poach Oregon and Washington. Okay, well, there go 2 more. You've got Arizona, who's a powerhouse in college hoops. Well, where would they fit nice? Oh, the Big 12, because the Big 12 is a hell of a basketball conference. Oh, what also makes sense in the Big 12? Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. So there's 4. You lose Washington and Oregon. There's 6. Well, what happens to Cal and Stanford? I don't know. Stanford's a good academic school, and they've fallen on some hard luck in football lately, but Big Ten would sign up tomorrow for the 2 academic schools. Well, who does that leave? Oregon State and Washington State. And then what are you? Do they join the Mountain West? Does the Pac-12 pick up San Diego State and Boise? I don't know. I just know that the realignment's not done. And the Pac-12, soon to be the Pac-10 again, is going to have a really hard – see, where the Pac-12 screwed up, I'd have gotten BYU years ago. I would have brought in BYU and probably San Diego State years ago just to get a step ahead. I mean, BYU beats Pac-12 schools every year. So I'd have picked them up immediately. And so with how this thing's shaping, with the TV media rights, losing the LA schools was catastrophic to this league. And so, look, Oregon knows its place in the sport right now, and they know their value, and that's the same with Washington. And by the way, both of those teams are going to be really good this year. And so, I don't know, man. This thing, to me, just based on everything else we've seen, is trending in a dissolve of the Pac-12, Pac-10, and I just hope we don't see it anytime soon.
All right, so as we're winding down here, let's talk about the season ahead. Get some of the predictions for you. Obviously, there'll be one more season of the Pac-12 as we've currently come to know it. How do you see the season playing out? Which 2 teams are going to be battling in Vegas when it's all said and done?
Well, I just talked about Oregon and Washington. They're really, really good. And oh, by the way, USC's got the returning Heisman Trophy winner. They brought in some more portal guys. It's year 2 of Lincoln Riley. That's 3. But I still believe the league goes through Utah. I think they are still the class of the league. They've got the right people coming back. They've got the right mentality going there in Utah. I still believe, and here's the difference with Utah. Oregon and USC, and Michael Penix Jr. kind of changed the trajectory of Washington last year, which is why I think they come back with a lot of attention. USC's glitzy and fun and skill positions and Heisman trophies and celebrities and Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush, that's always been USC's brand. Oregon is the Pacific Northwest. It's Nike, it's uniforms, it's back in the day with Chip Kelly and speed, and it's all of that. That's always been Oregon. You know what Utah does? They just line up and beat you to hell. That's what they do. They don't care about the uniforms and the 5 stars and the blazing. They just line up and beat the hell out of you. And until someone proves that they can beat them back and hit them back, it's Utah. Now, this could be the year if USC figures it out defensively that they get them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I will always put Utah into the Pac-12 championship, and someone tells me otherwise. And I think just because of everything they got coming back, I'll put USC in there.
They had a couple of classic games a year ago. So
yeah, they did. Yeah. And then, again, that was year 1 of Lincoln. So my guess is he'll figure that out at some point.
All right. So got to give love to the G5. Obviously they got a spot in the New Year's Six.
Yeah.
Which G5 do you think has the inside track and getting that spot?
Man, we lost them all. They all went to the Big 12. I was all on. I called a UCF game last year on Thursday Night College Football, and I was like, this program could hang with anybody. Then they, obviously they're going to the Big 12. Same with Houston. They're headed to the Big 12. We loved the Tulane story last year, didn't we? They lost a lot of their players at Pratt. I believe Michael Pratt's back, but their running back, he went to the NFL, Tajay Spears.
Yeah.
So Cincinnati, look, all of our G5s are Cincinnati's in the Big 12. So it's going to be interesting to see which these guys can hang in there with the schedule debate again, because we already talked about that. Well, they don't play enough schedule. Well, You just took 4 of the best ones to a Power 5. And so I really hope some of these G5 schools hang in there long enough to still be able to compete at a high level, because that Willie Fritz story and that turnaround last year was incredible.
Final season of the 4-team playoff.
Yeah.
Which 4 teams are you putting in there as of right now, and which one ultimately holds a crystal football?
Well, schedule-wise, Georgia, I mean, they've got enough quarterbacks to come back. I love Georgia again this year. I believe LSU is coming out of the West again. I believe it's going to be an LSU-Georgia SEC championship game. I could see 2 teams again from the SEC. I could see LSU making it. I think the Pac-12 gets one in this year. I think Pac-12 is getting one in. I think it's going to be USC. In their final year in the Pac-12, I can see them running to the playoff. And then look, Ohio State's loaded. Michigan's loaded. It's so tough to say now, but I'll give you 2 SECs, LSU, Georgia. I'll give you USC, and I'll give you Michigan's been there a couple of years. Ohio State, they had 2 teams in there. I'm going to give you Harbaugh and Michigan again.
Okay.
For the 3rd year in a row. He's got that thing going. I just don't know. Look, I'd love to see the AC. I'd love to see Florida State come back. I want to see Miami come back. We'll see what Cade Klubnik does, the young kid at quarterback for Clemson. I'd love to see that conference represented again, but you look at the SEC West, I mean, it is absolutely, I know people roll their, I mean, it is loaded. Absolutely loaded when you consider Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. He's got everybody coming back. When you consider Will Rogers is back at Mississippi State, Hugh Freeze is back in the league at Auburn, Brian Kelly's in year 2 at LSU, Nick Saban is Nick Saban. I mean, it's insane how loaded that side is. Tennessee's on the up. Shane Beamer at South Carolina in the East. Florida under Billy Napier. I mean, there's so much good football out there. We need the Pac-12, even if it is USC, to get back into the college football playoff discussion, just to help boost up the league before, whatever happens to it afterwards.
Yeah, I was trying to make my 4, and I had LSU in there as well, because it'd be interesting to see like ASU fans and seeing Jaden Daniels get in there, or even the Florida State with Mike Norvell, some familiar faces in there. But ultimately, when we look ahead just for this 2023 season, year 1 of the Kenny Dillingham era in Tempe, come December, what do you need to see over these next few months to feel that this first year of this new era was a success?
Yeah. Everyone's like, whoa, what do you want for the record? I'm not going to give you a record because I think that's unfair. I want to see belief on the field. Like I want to see effort. It sounds so stupid and easy, but what was it? 70-7, 77-7 down in Tucson. What was that?
70-7.
70-7. There wasn't effort on the other side. ASU went in there and curb stomped, but there wasn't effort on the other side. It's easy to tell when there's effort. There wasn't effort in that loss last year to Eastern Michigan. Okay. So I want to see 12 games of belief. Kenny's going to make mistakes as your rookie head coach, but I want to go into the Arizona game saying, you know what? This thing's headed in the right direction. And even the losses are close. Even in the games where they're going to be double-digit underdogs, they fight until the 4th quarter. Because to me, that's the ultimate indication of buy-in. Buy-in is the ultimate indication going into the 4th quarter. Coaches quitting or players quitting, that's the ultimate sign that the coach has lost the team. And so year 1 of Kenny, just fight and keep fighting. Pull off an upset people don't think you can. Take every game to the 4th quarter and beat U of A. You get all that in, and I'm going to be a happy guy going at the end of year 1 for Kenny.
Well, Matt, as always, awesome time talking
absolutely
with you. It's great to, the 10 years strong now, and we'll make sure to definitely get you back on the show during the season so you can jump ahead of Kyle Dodd in the all-important Speak of the Devil.
Yeah, I'll hit you up. I'm going to email you and say, hey, we need to get back on. I got to shut Dodd up, and we'll do it. Even if it's a 5-minute, hey, what'd you see at ASU this week? I will do it just to stay ahead of him.
Sounds good. Maybe after ASU takes down Coach Prime to open up Pac-12 play.
That would be amazing. Yes, book it.
All right, some really great stuff from Matt Barrie and breaking down the Pac-12, ASU, activating the Valley, and the college football landscape at large. But now, Joe, let's dive into our annual look at the Pac-12. We're going to take a look at the other 11 teams because, of course, we'll bring you our very in-depth and detailed ASU season preview a little bit closer to the season. So we're going to run down all 11 of the other teams, some of the kind of the big picture storylines that are facing each of these competing programs. Then we're going to run down how we think the Pac-12 is going to finish out in terms of order. Remember, then there are no more North and South divisions. Then give our predictions for some of the individual awards and some of the national, playoff situations and such. It's going to be a good old time. So now that there are no divisions, Joe, let's start off in alphabetical order. And of course, that means we got to start talking about the Wildcats, owners of the Territorial Cup temporarily. The trajectory, though, is undoubtedly up in this program. Jed Fish is doing some good things. I mean, obviously, a couple of years ago, they were dreadful, one of the worst Power 5, if not FBS programs in the country. The offense should be really good yet again. Jaden DeLaura is back. Of course, there's some offseason controversy with the rape case and the settlement they're in. It will be very interesting to see exactly how that is handled at Media Day and Friday. But obviously a very exciting quarterback, some oftentimes reckless, but ultimately effective. The offensive line, for one, is pretty strong. Jordan Morgan's an absolute NFL prospect at offensive tackle. Dorian Singer, of course, is a huge loss when he went to USC. Obviously, ASU is not the only in-state program that can know the sting of losing an all-conference player to the Trojans. But Jacob Cowan is back. Tet McMillan, a fantastic freshman season a year ago. Big time, big body target. Obviously, he's back, so he got some weapons there. The question, Joe, I think is the defense any good and good enough to get to a bowl? I mean, they lose Christian Roland Wallace again to USC. Big time secondary concerns. Keon Byers also going to USC. Their defensive lineman, so the line's a question. They did pick up the former 5-star prospect linebacker Justin Lowe from Oregon, but can he live up to the potential? I mean, is it time, but just a change of scenery? He couldn't live up. So you know what you're going to get with the Cats. A good offense, a defense with a lot of question marks, but is it good enough? But I think so far the trend line has been up, but up to what degree?
Yeah, so they got to make some improvements. I mean, I know that there was a lot of hype and they were kind of the darling of some folks across the conference or, outsiders looking in, but still fell short, right? So it's a matter of DeLaura being consistent. They still have obviously weapons they can throw to, but he didn't replace Singer, right? You know what I mean? So it's hard to think that they'll be better without him. That just seems like a very basic concept, thing to say. So offensively, they should still be powerful, of course, need to be consistent. And then defense, they're going to be obviously relying on transfers, and we'll see what comes out of Flo. I know that there's some excitement there, and he was someone that I thought would have been really interesting to come here. Obviously, he was a massive, massive, big-time recruit, Vontez Burfict type of pickup when he went to Oregon, but his college career to date has been a little lacking. And I know they had made some additional pickups on the defensive side as well, but I mean, they need some drastic changes because that defense was really bad. So we'll see how that trend line ticks up and if they're going to be able to do anything that really results in much better than last year. And I think they're going to be a little hard pressed to do that, but they could be maybe better incrementally in some areas.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think a program like that, you kind of like Arizona State, you're going to have typically you have a lot of good skill guys, but are they big enough in the trenches? Are they tough enough in the trenches to get things done? And I think for the first time in a while, you're going to have a pretty good offensive line for the Cats, but just that defensive line, especially with the Byers defection, that's going to be a little bit difficult for them to overcome. So we'll see. Just because there's a lot of questions the teams in this conference, including at Cal, ASU's first road trip of the year, September 30th. They're going to be going to Berkeley, first time since 2019. Now, the refrain from Cal the last few years, the offense just is terrible. So they're revamping everything yet again. New offensive coordinator for Justin Wilcox up there. It's a familiar name, Jake Spavital. He's a guy who has some Berkeley ties. Most recently was a head coach at Texas State. Where interesting approach of just like ignoring high school recruiting entirely. But of course, he's put together some pretty good offenses in his day as a coordinator. So he's got a new quarterback, Sam Jackson, coming over from TCU, an exciting dual threat. We'll see but he's a guy who's the third stringer for the Horned Frog. So we'll see if he's able to kind of revitalize things. We have Jaden Knott, who was a fantastic addition to their backfield a year ago, really effective runner. Taj Davis comes over from Washington as a wide receiver. Jeremiah Hunter is back as well. But what's interesting is that typically the Cal recipe, Joe, has been the good or terrible offense pretty good defense, but last year the defense really wasn't very good at all. The pass rush is almost non-existent, but they do have a pretty good linebacker combo in Jackson Sherman and David Reese there. Secondary's got some questions. One thing I think to really look at it, if you're an ASU fan or even just a local person, Brett Johnson, of course, was a prep star here in the Valley, just has some terrible injury luck, missed the last 2 seasons due to injury. I believe one was a car crash or something along those lines. So he's hopefully going to get back. I believe I read somewhere like it's been like 1,100 days since he was in a game. So really hoping to see that if him get back in, because by all accounts, he's a really good kid, but some defensive questions, especially, up front. Secondary is typically pretty good, but they went really pretty hard in the transfer portal to address those concerns in the secondary, but still a lot of questions about Cal and just, Justin Wilcox. It's interesting. A couple of years ago, like the Oregon job was his if he agreed to certain conditions, but still at Cal, still plugging along. But just you wonder if there's another disappointing season, how long that leash is going to be.
Yeah, that's the thing that really stands out to me is, what sort of patience is there for him up in Berkeley? Because things trended up positively his first few years. In his second and third year, won a combined 15 games in 18 and 19, but only 10 total victories across the last 2 full seasons in the COVID season. So, you're talking about working on a 4th consecutive season of possibly missing bowl eligibility. Cal is just such an interesting program when you think about it, because I think we might think of them as a different program than they are, because when I really first started getting into, watching college football pretty religiously was, in the Aaron Rodgers days and then the Marshawn Lynch days. And when, Tedford had things rolling there and they're a nationally elite team, but that's the departure from the norm historically, as far as Cal is concerned. So yeah, they're, again, they're going to be real hard pressed to get to bowl eligibility, in my opinion. And, I think if that's something that you miss out on, depending on how things go, what path you get there, it's a possibility that Wilcox's job could be on the line. Cause like you said, I mean, he was a prime candidate for a lot of positions. I think on at least one occasion, if not 2, he was someone that was in the discussion for ASU or someone that was on the fan wish list. So it's, funny how these things work out, but yeah, that's a team I'd say, I mean, if you look at things, they've got to have the most, maybe urgency is the right word, if you look at the ones that might be possibly at the bottom tier of the conference, a lot of them have 1st and 2nd year head coaches, but they're there with a guy that's been there a bit. So as far as a hot seat candidate, I would say that Wilcox has got to be the easiest in the conference, if you ask me.
Going to a guy that's definitely not on a hot seat, but definitely a hot topic conversation over the last several months. Colorado, let's talk some Coach Prime, Joe. The grand experiment in Boulder is underway. Massive turnover, like at ASU. I think the numbers are pretty similar, but just going about it perhaps in a less public way than Coach Prime has been doing. And that was interesting. I saw that you tweeted out that even the Pac-12,
the official
release,
the official press release one has the grid of the coaches, and I think the times that they'll be interviewed, the basic information. Had Dion, quote, Coach Prime Sanders. And it's just I get it. I get it from a branding perspective of the conference, because he's everything to them right now. I get that. So it didn't shock me that sort of thing was there, but I'm just that was nails on chalkboard to me. You can call me old fashioned or whatever, but it's just I've never seen people have had nicknames, but it's such a I don't know, modern day branding thing that we have to call him Coach Prime. He's Coach Prime. He always hashtags Coach Prime every single tweet he sends. It's I don't dislike the dude, but it is, man,
a bit much.
It became a circus very quickly. And, I got a little bit of happiness. I saw, I don't know if it was a Reddit account, just some random college football account. And they tweeted out a week or so ago or a handful of days ago. It says, fill in the blank. You were already sick of blank in college football. And a lot of people were Colorado. I'm thank you. I feel seen here. So, on the field, we'll see what we get. A lot, there are people that are expecting quite a bit. That's going to be a major turnaround. I've said many times, I think it's either going to be a massive success or it's going to be one of the most epic failures. When I say failures, I don't necessarily mean it performance-wise, though that would have to be a component of it, but just how, if things don't go well, you could see it just falling apart epically, maybe publicly. You know what I mean?
How's he going to react? Because when they lose 3 in a row, 4 in a row, because that's going to happen.
They could be their first few games. Like their early season schedule is a nightmare.
TCU, Colorado State, Nebraska are like, right?
Yeah. And it's among those. And I think their early conference schedule is difficult too. So yeah, I mean, this is something where, yes, of course, they could start out and upset some teams and really be off to the races. But for them to start something like 1-3 or 0-4 or something around that ballpark is not out of the equation.
Yeah, so they do have a lot of like talented transfers. Obviously, there's been an infusion of talent, and the recruiting has greatly picked up. I do really like the offensive coordinator hire in Sean Lewis, the former Kent State head coach. Huge fan of him. So they're going to be running up-tempo offense. Shedeur Sanders, Deion's kid, is coming over from Jackson State with him. I believe he was a former 4-star prospect as well. But questions, I mean, making that jump up from the FCS level to the FBS, a Power 5 level, it's going to be really interesting. So they revamped their wide receiver group because obviously guys like Jordan Tyson are fled to ASU. So they got USF's top 2 guys in there. Travis Hunter, of course, the number 1 overall recruits. He's going to be playing both ways. He'll be interesting. The running backs look pretty good, actually. So the offense is shaping up pretty well. Alden McCaskill, the Houston transfer, best name in college football, Cavassier Smoke, coming over from Kentucky, a 4-star freshman, and Dylan Edwards is also a guy that's got some folks really excited up there. But kind of like, with U of A, got a lot of very exciting playmakers, but the trenches and the lines are going to be really key. And I think as much as flash as they have, I don't know, they got a whole lot of substance in those trenches as of yet. 3 returners and 6 lower level transfers are brought into to bolster the offensive line. Going over to defense, I mean, as you would expect with a Deion Sanders coach team, attract a lot of good corners. Obviously, Travis Hunter, the number 1 corner in the country in this class, Cormani McLean is coming in as well. But how are they going to be up front? I have big time questions in the linebacker group. So this could be a team where, I mean, there's a lot of the hype on isn't. I don't think is going to match what we see in the outfield product. They're going to be better. It's hard by default. They're going to be better. I just don't know that. They're not. I don't see them making a run at like 6-7 wins. I mean, 3 are probably. I don't know. I feel good about maybe 3 to 4 after a lot of these. A few weeks in the season to get going a little bit.
I think whatever happens with them, either direction is going to be kind of overhyped. Like you said, if they lose their first 3-4 games or go 1-3, then you might have some talking heads that are really saying this. Oh, this is a failure. Really just taking it a far south direction. Now, then, if they're winning those games, then it's going to be so far the positive direction, I guess, as far as they're concerned. So there's going to be expectations of the fans because they had that 40,000 or whatever that sell out at the spring game, charging tickets, so it's going to be, it's hard to really, put into context or compare it to any, coaching change that we've seen because all the different factors and all the new players and all the different, obviously the coaching staff is incredible. They're head coach caliber coaches that came in. So there are some things on their side, and it's just the hype is something substantial. Yeah. So to your point, they'll certainly be better. They could kind of be a similar team like Arizona was last year, where they were kind of, again, like the darling of the people who may not really care about the Pac-12. I think there are people that I just saw that seemed to kind of dig U of A last year for some reason. Colorado, obviously, it's going to be very divisive. You're going to have people nationally that are going to love it, people nationally that are going to hate it. So they should be improved, but getting to bowl eligibility, that would be a major jump, not just because of what they have to rebuild, but because of the function of the other teams in the conference, where you're going to have, probably 5 preseason top 25 teams, I'd say, in the league. So, you've got some competition. It's going to be, it's tough to win 6-7 games when you're going against teams that could possibly be, you have nearly half the conference that's in competition for high-level bowl games.
Is Deion the head coach in Boulder in 2026?
I guess I have to say no, because I think I've said it'd be 3 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a short-lived experiment. Either if it doesn't go well, I think he's just going to go do something else. But I think also he's using this as a potential jumping pad to perhaps an ACC job back at get to Florida State or maybe the NFL.
And I think that he doesn't even have to do that much at Colorado. I mean, But if like Texas A&M says, hey, we're just going to give you a limitless amount of money and you just be our guy, you be our brand and you do your thing and we'll have all the money behind it. I think that he could coach at Colorado 3 years and go to one bowl game. And I think he'd still be a, I guess, pun intended, prime candidate for a lot of other jobs because it will be so alluring just to see what he can do. Okay, Colorado, yes, they've got some, story tradition and national championship pedigree from decades ago. But what can we do if we insert that figure into what I'm just saying hypothetically, if you're, because there are teams in the South that a couple years from now, like people aren't, it's obviously jumping up. People aren't going crazy about Billy Napier. They're like fans over there that are pretty fired up about that. Obviously, Mike Norvell did himself a huge favor last year with how they performed. Miami's, their team, it'd be weird, obviously, for him to go to a team in Florida that's not Florida State, but. Yeah, I think it won't take a ton for him to still stay on top. He doesn't have to go out and win, 8 to 10 games 3 years in a row and to be the top candidate for national coaching position. So, yeah, to your point, I think it just doesn't pass the smell test of, it's going to stick around for, 6-7 years and, win 5-6 games, some hills and valleys there. It just does not seem like a long play.
If he can get the program that we saw a year ago into a bowl game in 3 years, it's a good job. We'll see. It's going to be entertaining in any regard. All right, next up alphabetically, let's talk some Ducks. How will Bo Nix do without Kenny Dillingham? It's going to be interesting. Obviously, Kenny's resume of rebuilding, revitalizing quarterbacks speaks for itself with Jordan Travis and most recently Bo Nix going from Bo Picks to Heisman contender. Will Stein's coming over from UTSA as the new OC. I really like that offense. We'll talk about UTSA a little bit later on in the national part because they've been really fun the last several years. So it'll be really interesting now that Will Stein's going to get a lot better weapons to utilize. And he's got a quarterback coming off a monster year. The backfield tandem, Bucky Irving, Noah Whittington was really effective. Bucky Irving, of course, was one of the better backs in the conference. You have Troy Franklin, who emerged as one of the Pac-12's best receivers a year ago. And they really kind of added a bunch of talent there. You get the Trayshawn Holden coming over from Bama, Gary Bryant Jr., I believe he's a one-time ASU target, coming over from USC, Tez Johnson from Troy. Got a pretty good tight end there. The offensive tackles are always good in Eugene. But what does the defense in year 2 under Dan Lanning look like? Because it wasn't tremendous a year ago, but you saw some strides a little bit. There's a lot of transfers they're bringing in ideally to revitalize that pass rush, which is pretty bad a year ago. Brendan Dorless is the defensive end that's an all-conference caliber player. Got in backfield a good amount last year, but are they going to be able to successfully kind of get after it and make the opposing quarterback's life pretty miserable? They added some good safeties: Tysheem Johnson from Ole Miss, Evan Williams from Fresno State. But overall, I think it's going to be, how much of a stride forward can this defense make? Connor Soley, former Sun Devil, he's a Duck as well. Jordan Birch they brought over from South Carolina as well. Some new pieces there, a lot of new faces, but and I think that Dan Lanning's track record is good enough that the defense is going to be good, but can they make that jump from that kind of, a 9-win Oregon Duck team to kind of that perennial conference contender caliber of the Ducks that's kind of ingrained into all of our collective college football consciousnesses, especially when you got some big dogs and I guess pun intended there, and UW and USC to contend with this year.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but I'm really high on them. I think obviously the career rejuvenation of Bo Nix under Kenny Dillingham is something that, he can build on, and you have the pieces around him, and they really did very well in the transfer portal market. And I think that's going to be a big difference maker for them. I see this being maybe like a weirder year for the conference than people think. Maybe I'm just hoping for some chaos and not predictability. So I think that they're ones that, obviously a lot of love is going to be given to USC. I would imagine the media will probably pick them as the conference champion when that comes out. And then, obviously a lot of people are really high on Washington and a bunch of other teams and can't count Utah out, but something about Oregon just kind of stands out to me. I think Nix is prime for, to cap off his college career in a high way. And I just think that they got pieces in the right places when it came to the transfer portal, in addition to their returners that they can really strike.
All right. Moving over to Oregon State, who defeated the Ducks in a memorable game a season ago. And the big storyline there, of course, is DJ Uiagalelei is he going to be the quarterback? Is he going to be able to revitalize and get things back on track after his time at Clemson. Ben Branson's not going to give that job just over too easily. So you figure, though, the track record of Jonathan Smith as a kind of a quarterback whisperer and just the great job. I mean, I'm really have been impressed with him over the last several years and getting the Beavers to be one of the more entertaining and one of the best hard-nosed teams in this conference. You know what you're going to get with the Beavs. You're going to get a hard-nosed football team that has a good offensive line. It's going to run the ball really effectively. Damian Martinez was a menace in his first season a year ago, and so I think he's going to be one of the Pac-12's top rushers. Deshaun Fenwick and Jam Griffin are back as well. The good tight ends, even though they lost one to the NFL. Jermaine Terry comes over from Cal. The defense, though, is going to be an interesting question because they were a vicious unit a season ago, but they lose 5 of their top 7 tacklers, including linebacker Omar Spates, who's going to LSU, and that was one of the best defenders in the entire conference. But they do have some very talented pieces as well. It seems like there's certain schools that are very good at certain positions, and Oregon State always seems to have great safeties. And so they have Oladapo as well coming back as well. Even though they lost both corners to the NFL, I think the track record there speaks that they're going to be having some quality additions there. But when you play the kind of offense that they have been known to play, to run the ball effectively, and if you have finally an upgrade at quarterback, because no offense to guys like Ben Branson, but you put a guy with the talent that DJ has, and if he's able to kind of get things back on track and show why he was that 5-star, in addition to kind of the tough line that they have, this could be a team, another dark. I guess it's weird to say it's a dark horse when they're coming off a 10-win year, but when you got all the media love for USC and Washington, Oregon, and of course the 2-time defending champ Utah Utes, Oregon State could make some serious top level noise.
I think we're either at or very, very near the point with Oregon State now, modern day Oregon State, to where it's similar to how it was under Riley, 10, 15, more than 10, but 15 or so years ago, where, they're almost kind of like what Utah has been, where they had some spikes, some ups and some downs, and then they put enough consistency together to where it's like, okay, this is just a team that even if there's turnover, even if there are questions, you give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think after last year, again, if we're not at that point to where it's like, no matter what, this is going to be a bowl eligible team. I mean, obviously that I think they're well above that as far as this season is concerned, but as far as just the typical year-to-year expectation, the nature of the team becoming reminiscent of those teams like Jonathan Smith played for, or shortly thereafter when you had Ken Simonson, Steven Jackson, the Rogers brothers, that sort of thing, where you had these, running backs that sometimes didn't even really know who they were before they, started playing ball, but quickly made an impact. Good line play, smart quarterback decisions. So I think that they're set to be nearly, I don't see a major drop off, even if things don't click perfectly. And if they do, then they could surprise just about anybody in the conference, because I still think that, like you said, the most of the people predicting this conference are going to put them, in the top 5, but probably not higher than 5, but they can beat anybody in the top 5. So this is one that could sneak up on people. I think their floor is still pretty high. Like I said, this is not a team that I think that was a one-hit wonder last year, and they're going to go back down to a 3 or 4 win team or something like that. That would be catastrophic. But staying around that 10-win mark, or maybe even just like the 8 to 9, I think is something that's still very doable. It's just not Jonathan Smith's not a flash in the pan type dude.
All right, let's talk some Trojans, their final year in the Pac-12 Conference. And you know what you're going to get on offense. You're going to get a ton of points. You're going to have Caleb Williams doing absolute magic out there. I mean, his chances of repeating, being the first ones with Archie Griffin, being only just the second guy, I don't know. I'm not counting out what he's able to do, especially when you lose a guy like Jordan Addison, but you replace him with Dorian Singer, another first-team all-conference player. You bring back Taj Washington, Mario Williams, Brendan Rice is back. You add Deuce Robinson, the best recruit in the state of Arizona, going over to play some tight end for him. Austin Jones is back. They really heavy in the portal to address the offensive line, but they're going to score 40 a game. That's a given. Can they not give up 41 a game? Because that defense was extremely feast or famine, one of the best in the units in the country at taking away the ball. But if they're not getting picks or forcing fumbles, people were putting up a lot of points and yards on them. Alex Grinch is back as defensive coordinator. That's maybe a bit of a surprise there, but they went hard in the portal to bring in some playmakers to help on that side of the ball. Mason Cobb is a name familiar because he was formerly of Oklahoma State, one of the better backers in the Big 12 Conference. Barrie Alexander's coming over, D lineman from Georgia. Anthony Lucas, another former Arizona high school star, former 5-star guy. He's coming over from A&M. Oh, yeah, they still have a pretty good linebacker in Eric Gentry, and rumor has it they also got a good punter.
Yeah, familiar names, huh? Yeah, it's going to be all about basically what does Caleb Williams have in store as his encore performance. And it's not like he wasn't a known commodity going into last year, but he's a very much more known commodity now that he won the Heisman Trophy. And the more maybe, I don't know if problematic is the right word, but Lincoln Riley, can you win the big one? I mean, the way that the season absolutely nosedived for them at a time when it was looking like they were really trending toward a college football playoff position, and you end it with those couple losses. I mean, that definitely stings. So I think there certainly will still be right at the forefront of things, but that's going to be pretty much the main thing I'm going to keep an eye on is, can you win the big ones? If you get to those elite games down the stretch of the season, the conference championship game, can you get over that hump, or are there things that are going to fall between the cracks? Because it seems like that was a gripe that Oklahoma fans had about him, about being able to really get past that, because they'd even get to the playoff, but not have much of a performance there. So when you have a program that has those level of expectations, where it's not just good enough to win 10 games or even 11 games or have the win total doesn't matter. It's, what are you winning? Are you winning conference championships? And then now are you getting into the playoff? So if those boxes aren't checked, I mean, that's something that, again, the fan base has to have very high expectations, and rightfully so, and they can get there, but it's just like a razor thin margin for error of, if they fall short of a playoff appearance again in what will undoubtedly be Caleb Williams' last college season before they make the voyage over the Big Ten, fan base could get, I'm not saying they're going to try to push Lincoln Riley at the door, but it would be interesting if things happen this year as they did last.
All right. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Like, we know they can score. We know they got a lot of speed and athleticism, but can they play in games against like Utah where it's going to be grind out? Can, they recover from getting punched in the mouth in a game? Didn't do too well in those two matchups against Utah a season ago, but we'll see. I mean, they really went hard on the defensive side of the ball. So, if they can keep teams under 40, that they might make a run to that playoff spot. All right, let's talk about Stanford. That is still the most inexplicable loss, I don't know, maybe in recent years, last year for ASU. And not only was that a bad Stanford team, but this might also be kind of a blessing in disguise. Maybe they returned the least production in the Power 5. 34% of their offense, 36% of their defensive production is coming back, which might not be bad. Clean house. Also, no longer there, David Shaw, the longtime coach who had a tremendous run, taking over for Jim Harbaugh, but just things the last few years just really have not been working out too well. Troy Taylor era begins. He, of course, was the Sac State head coach in recent years, and that's a great offensive mind. We saw what Cam Scatabo was able to do with him last season. Just tremendous offensive mind there. So we'll see now that how it translates here and there in Palo Alto. What is going well is the recruiting, Joe. 8 4-star commits so far, 11th in the country. So that's pretty good for Stanford. So, I mean, we'll talk about the struggles about this team on the field, but the future might be pretty good.
Yeah, the future beyond 23 could be solid. And it's just a matter of really getting to that point, because, for this season, looks pretty bleak. We've seen crazier things as far as first-year head coaches, doing some things and bringing teams out of the cellar. But you just don't really get the sense that that's going to happen. They're a little handicapped because if you're talking about, transfer portal and the ability to really take advantage of that, like a lot of teams in the conference and then the country do, the academic requirements that Stanford has, it's difficult to go after every single collegiate athlete that you can find. So you have to obviously be, kind of picky in what you do there because your options are limited. So yeah, he seems to be a solid fit so far. Again, for future purposes, they're recruiting at a very high level, but that isn't necessarily, to my knowledge, to my belief, going to be reflected in this season.
It's putting together a good offense this year. It's going to be a little challenging. The number one concern is who's going to be the quarterback. Ari Patu is the longtime backup, has a chance to ascend to the throne. That's Tanner McKee left. Ashton Daniels has been around for a little bit. Justin Lamson comes over from Syracuse. They have a 4-star quarterback prospect, Miles Jackson, who was a former 2024 class, reclassified, and he's there now as well. Looks like Patu, based on some of the early reporting, like just because of his experience, might get the nod there. He's a mobile guy, got some strong arm, but he's got a good back in EJ Smith, and that's the son of Emmett. Benny Rosick is one of the best tight ends in the conference as well, but the offensive line, you think of Stanford football, and you just picture a big, burly, huge offensive line full of 6'6", 6'7" dudes. Just they were bad last year, and so that's going to be a big concern. Is no matter who the quarterback is or the weapons out there, if the line continues to be as bad as it was a year ago, this is going to be a pretty bad football team. Defense also was bad. They do have some pretty good players. David Bailey had a good freshman year as well. Gathan Bernadelle from FIU, a linebacker, he's going to be looked at to play a key role. And one interesting fact about him, Joe, he is the first undergraduate transfer in Stanford football history to enroll mid-year. So welcome.
Wow. Yeah. So I feel smart talking about how transfers are, not as much of an option there than they would be for other schools. So they basically kind of have to go the old school route of rebuilding a program year over year through the majority of traditional recruiting. So that's why, again, you're not seeing the kind of stuff that you're seeing with ASU, with Colorado, these first year head coaches where they're bringing in literally dozens of transfers. It's just a different circumstance there. So yeah, so I think future might be bright, and that's a fan base that certainly, what's a nice way to say they don't care? I mean, so even if something, the expectations can't be through the roof this season, but again, it could be better because things were just so dormant there for so long under Shaw. I mean, I was pretty, vocal about it when it came time to it, and it just, I can understand he was a great representative of the university, had a tremendous amount of early success that you can kind of coast off for a while, but the writing just seemed to be on the wall. It's just was not the same program from even the ones that he coached of the McCaffrey days and that sort of thing. So that to me was several years overdue, and we'll see what the new regime has in store.
The final year of UCLA in the Pac-12 is going to be an interesting one because there's going to be a lot of new faces on that offensive side of the ball. Gone is 12-year veteran Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's finally off to the NFL. Is Dante Moore ready? The former 5-star quarterback, a jewel of this class, I believe a former Oregon commit coming out of Michigan. He flipped to UCLA, and he's got an inside track being the new quarterback for the Bruins and Chip Kelly. Ethan Garber is the former 4-star prospect in his own right. He's back as well, so that'll be interesting to see if they are ready to hand the reins over to the youngster, much as they did a few years ago with DTR. It took DTR some time, but perhaps Moore can get things going a little quicker. Of course, and then Zach Charbonnet is gone as well, the bell cow back over the last couple of years. But interesting, Carson Steele from Ball State, one of the MAC's leading rushers, he's now a Bruin. Is he going to be able to kind of get things going on the ground and keep the Chip Kelly offense humming along at that level? They really went heavy on the portal to help the offensive line situation there. A lot of new faces there. The top 3 pass catchers are gone. Kyle Ford comes over from USC. J. Michael Sturdivant is coming over from Cal as well. But, I think the big question there is, who's going to be the quarterback, and is it Moore? How quickly can he kind of ascend to that level of hype and his skill level? 8 starters are back on the defensive side of the ball, but overall was kind of a up and down, not great year for the Bruin defense as well. They do have a pretty good group of linebackers as well. The pass rush and Latu is coming back. He posted double-digit sacks a season ago. They do have a new defensive coordinator in DeAnton Lynn. He's coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. He's kind of one of those, the trend of younger coaches, Joe. This guy's only 33, so just a shade younger than Kenny Dillingham. So a lot of new faces in Pasadena. We'll see if they can congeal pretty quickly because, as you mentioned, pretty deep conference and coming off the best year under Chip Kelly. The expectations for UCLA and their Pac-12 swan song may be a little high.
Yeah, I'm curious what the expectations will be. I know what Chip Kelly certainly, bought himself some time because things were getting a little dicey there, just wondering if that was going to work. And so, they've had some success. Now is that kind of like, all right, we know that you can do it, and we know there's going to be some adjustment. So what are they going to think for this year? Because I don't know if they're going to be up to that same level because it's a different deal when you have a very experienced quarterback as they had and someone who is just, getting better every year, and especially at the tail end. Like he was a little bit sluggish in the early going, but you could see it trending up for DTR the last couple of years. So, and then Charbonnet, just one of the better running backs in all of college football last year. That addition of Steele, that's a big deal. I know a lot of people are really high on him. So the quarterback's going to be the X factor. I still think this is their team that has earned enough credit to be like a bowl eligible team, not thinking that they're going to, again, dip back to that 4-win mark or something like that, where they had for a couple seasons in a row with Kelly. So will they hover around that 500 mark, or will they get enough out of their team to, pull a few upsets or legitimize themselves to be in that higher grade of things?
I feel like I should just record the Utah preview that we do every year and just like keep that and just maybe drop in a couple names there, because the brand is the strongest, most consistent in the conference. You know what you're going to get. They're going to have big, tough, nasty lines. They're going to run the ball really well. They're going to play outstanding, aggressive defense, and they're going to have a tight end who does great things, and that's the case here. I think the big question heading in for the 2-time defending conference champions, is Cam Rising going to be ready to go after his ACL injury suffered in the Rose Bowl? By all accounts, he's on track. He's going to be there at Pac-12 Media Day on Friday. That's typically pretty good sign. And so, like, you go last year, Brant Keith, he's one of the best tight ends in the conference. He goes down with an injury. His backup, Dalton Kincaid, comes in. All of a sudden, he's a first-round pick in the NFL draft. But Brant Keithy's back, so the guy that the Utah folks thought was better is now back in the fold and healthy. So, of course, the rising to tight end insert name here connection is going to be pretty good. Jaquindon Jackson is going to be interesting to track. A former quarterback who moved over to running back, had some great performances late in the season. So that'll be interesting there. Some good receivers in Money Parks and Devon Villay as well. But the defense is going to be really good again. Most of the defense is back. You have Junior Tafuna anchoring the things from this defensive tackle spot. Kareem Reed and Lander Barton, great at linebacker. Cole Bishop's one of the absolute best defensive backs in the entire conference. He's going to be there at the safety spot. I think right now, I mean, you have to look, they host Florida to open the year, then go at Baylor. Then they have a difficult run in conference and taking on probably the 2 best teams, or at least the 2 most highly regarded teams at USC and Washington. Both games are going to be on the road, and they host Oregon. So there's some difficulty on the schedule, but this is a team that proves that they get stronger as the season goes on. The brand is consistent. I'm never counting them out. They're going to be really good and really tough to beat again this year.
Yeah, they just kind of stayed steady last year and kind of snuck into things and made their way back in the Rose Bowl again. And that's the sign of a tenured, cohesive, and accomplished coaching staff where, you don't let the wheels fall off if you lose a game or 2 here or there. And for a team like that is now and was last year expected to do very high level things, you lose a game or 2. And I think because they lost that opener right at Florida last year, so that's something where other programs could get a little rattled by that, where they just kind of collected things, even through some injuries, as you mentioned, throughout the year. I think this will take some work because some of the other teams are pretty loaded in the conference. Again, we've said that ad nauseum. So this would be maybe one of the more impressive coaching performances by Whittingham, just to return to that level. It's difficult to, win multiple consecutive conference championships. To pull 3 in a row would be something, pretty dang impressive. So, and you got to, again, battle through the entire year. They've got a tough non-conference schedule, and there are some really strong teams elsewhere in the conference. So, like you said, you can't count them out. I personally think they're a little bit on the outside looking in. I'm just saying from like the top, 2. I'm not saying they're on the outside in a deeper position, but yeah, I mean, again, you cannot count them out. You know that the coaching staff and they just seem to do it every year, where they just find these players kind of out of nowhere that may not even be huge contributors in the early part of the year, and then just something happens and then they take off running. We've seen that in games they played against ASU. Sometimes that's been the catalyst for their players. So eager to see they can stay on that very, very high tier level. But I mean, the minimum expectation for the way this program is rolling is, at least 10 wins, right?
I think they'll have a good chance to get there because, yeah, they're going to be really, really good again. All right, let's talk about the Huskies, Joe. Kalen DeBoer came in, and I thought, that he would do good things. I was a big fan of his and what he did at Fresno State. I did not think he would do this good this soon. And, this offense was elite. Michael Penix Jr. stayed healthy. He just threw the ball over the yard. One of the top passing offenses in the entire country. I believe number one, actually, just ahead of Western Kentucky. A couple of 1,000-yard receivers are back in Adunze and McMillan. Jalen Polk's wears Cam Davis at running back. Some other weapons that have added at the Power 5 level through transfer portal. Now they're going to be their tackles are coming back, but they're going to be replacing the interior of their offensive line, which should be pretty good. But man, this offense is going to be really fun as long as Michael Penix is back there slinging the ball around. A lot of weapons there. Front seven, I think, should be pretty good. Braylon Trice is one of the best, most disruptive defenders in the conference. Perhaps a little bit more on him later. ZTF is back. They were pretty bad against the pass though last year, and so they addressed that. Brought in Jabbar Muhammad from Oklahoma State. So it's interesting. All these great Oklahoma State defenders from their very good defense that ASU faced a year ago. They're gonna have to face again, but just with different teams this year. It'll be interesting. They have a non-conference road game. They're gonna be heading to Michigan State, and then they have USC and Utah in back-to-back weeks. So that'll be interesting to see if they can get through that USC and Utah stretch. I think that's going to tell a lot. Because a little minor spoiler alert: I'm really high on Washington this upcoming year. Schedules though is going to be tough, but they definitely have the firepower to manage.
And so I don't know why, but I'm just not buying the hype. And I'm thinking it might be one of those deals like a Dennis Erickson 2007. You got a first-year head coach. You've got some talent. Now, obviously, it's not identical circumstances because Washington's bringing back a lot of guys. ASU had a senior-heavy team in 2007. But just something like that. I don't know what it is, and it's not that I have anything against them. It's not some logically, deep analytics thing. It's just a gut feeling. And I think it just might be the pecking order because it might just be that I'm higher on other teams than I am on them, as opposed to being like low on them, if that makes sense. I think they snuck up on some people. Obviously, ASU had their best game of the year last year in Tempe when the Huskies were in town, and they really, that fan base has to be really mad because they would have gone the conference championship game, right? If they won that game. Yeah. So
they don't have to come to Tempe this year, so their chances are good.
Right. There you go.
Get into the conference title game.
That's a whole different deal. So I mean, I don't think that they're going to fall flat on their face and be a losing team or a 500 team. But again, this is just an absolute gut feeling and nothing more. I think they'll have a challenge in being at the same level or within a game or so of that this year.
All right, let's round out our team preview. Washington State, Jake Dickard taking over there and obviously doing some good things. Really going to be interesting. We talked about the Washington passing offense being very potent, number one in the country. Number two, Western Kentucky. And one of their co-OCs, Ben Arbuckle, is now going to be the offensive coordinator, ripe old age of 27 years old. He's got some weapons, though, because Cam Ward's one of the more talented, if not kind of maybe frustrating quarterbacks in the conference, very up and down. He'll be coming back. I found this stat interesting. He's the first returning quarterback for Wazoo since Luke Falk in 2017. So they're not used to having some continuity there, but getting his feet wet, coming over from Incarnate Word. He's a very talented player, one of the very explosive at the FCS level. Had put up some good numbers, but there were some times where you thought that maybe he's pressing a little bit. The Cougs did lose their top 4 wide receivers from a season ago, but they did address the portal. They brought in a trio of transfers as well. Have a couple guys that are coming back as well with some starting experience. The running back should be good. Nakia Watson, Jalen Jenkins are a good duo, kind of a thunder and lightning, as ASU fans probably remember from a season ago. They got most of their offensive lines returning. The new defensive coordinator is coming over from Auburn. This question's there because there were some losses, but they do probably have probably the best edge combination, at least heading into this season, and Ron Stone and Brennan Jackson, guys with all conference honors on their resume as well. They went hard in the transfer portal to help the linebacker spot. Of course, Travion Brown is now a Sun Devil. Henley's gone as well. Ahmed McCullough is coming over from Maryland. Devin Richardson from Texas. They got some good defensive backs in Sam Lockett is at safety and Chow Smith Wade, at corner. But overall, I think this is going to be a pretty fun offense to watch. If anybody who's watched Western Kentucky on like the CBS Sports Net games, late at night, that's a fun offense. So I think when you have some of the components there, Cam Ward kind of leading this Western Kentucky infused Arbuckle offense, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think you have the pieces in place on defense to at least get this team to be 6-7 win team.
Yeah, I think hovering around the 500 mark is doable. Defensively is going to be interesting to see, of course, how they cope for the losses that ended up in Tempe here, as far as both coaches and players. So once again, it's all a function of a lot of other things. I just don't see this as a team that's going to go out there and put together a lot of upsets to win 8+ games, something like that, because they'll have to do something like that to get there. So yeah, I think that they're aiming for a decent season, very likely going to a bowl game, but it'll take some pretty impressive performances out of the blue for them to really get into like that top 4. I mean, or even the top half of the conference. Realistically, I mean, it's just going to be dog eat dog stuff. And so I think they're one of those teams that's just kind of on the fringe of that, maybe similar, kind of close to like a UCLA, to where they've got a lot of things going for them. They've got some things that they have to address, but most importantly, they have some teams ahead of them that are just really stacked. And so it's going to be difficult to consistently beat those better teams and avoid those tacking up as L's on your record every couple weeks.
All right, so now let's get into some of our predictions for the season ahead. And again, we will go very deep and dive into ASU in our season preview episode here in a couple weeks. Let's start off with the order of finish for the Pac-12, and perhaps save for Phillips some anticipation. We'll go 12-1. First group of 6 for me. I think Stanford is finishing dead last. I have them at number 12. I have Cal at number 11. Colorado does take some steps forward. Ultimately not enough. So that I have them finishing 10. Arizona at 9. ASU finishing at in the 8th spot, and UCLA rounding out the bottom 6 at number 7.
It almost became a 0 notes situation, except for the last one. So from 12 to 8, I agree completely. I have Washington State at 7.
Okay, well, I have Washington State as number 6. So yeah, I can see them like very close. I do think kind of that 6 through 9 range is going to be potentially pretty interchangeable. I
think those teams will be separated by like 1-2 games at the most.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be that parity, and those ones that may or may not be bowl eligible.
And then the top 5, I do think that there's kind of a gap right now heading into this year of these top 5 teams and kind of the rest of the conference. I just I think as you mentioned, Oregon State can beat anybody in this conference, but I just think kind of right now heading in, I have them slotted 5. Weird to have the 2-time defending champs a little bit on the outside looking in, but number 4, Oregon 3, Washington I think will finish 2nd and get a berth in the Pac-12 title game, and USC I think will win the top overall seed and face the Huskies in Vegas.
So we're just going regular season finish here.
Regular season.
I don't have any adjustments yet, but that's important for me to know. Okay.
Yeah, so that we'll talk. And so you also have USC and Washington in the title game?
So no, but so moving backward a little bit, I have UCLA at 6 because I had Washington State at 7. Yeah. So those interchangeable. And here's where the hot take comes in. I have Washington 5th.
Ooh.
Oregon State 4th, Utah 3rd, and then Oregon 2nd, USC 1st, if we're talking about the regular season pre-conference title game.
So you have the Trojans, Ducks in Vegas. Who emerges with the conference crown?
In that one, I have Oregon.
Ooh,
because Lincoln Riley can't win the big one. So
I too think that Lincoln Riley cannot win the big one. I think that he will get to Vegas and fall to Washington, who the Huskies will take the conference in year 2 of Kalen DeBoer. All right, let's talk about some individual honors here. Offensive Player of the Year, Joe. Who's your pick?
So, I mean, obviously the easy prediction would be Caleb Williams. I think that between what I expect to happen, and I think when you've got a guy, whether it's conference Player of the Year is a little bit easier, but I mean the Heisman is just this massive magnifying glass to where it's like you almost have to outdo yourself. Like if you stumble in any way or if your numbers are similar, then it might be another guy. That's why we haven't seen a repeat Heisman Trophy winner in 50 years. Conference level, a little bit different, but keeping in the trend line of what I'm predicting of, Oregon being in a top spot and trending toward the conference title, I'm going to say Bo Nix goes out on top and is the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year.
That would be a nice little kind of full circle story for him, as one of the elite recruits to bust to Heisman contender and potentially Player of the Year. I have Caleb Williams. I just too many times was he just like otherworldly. I think his weapons there. I think he might actually get some help from the defense, and I think that might help him as with the perhaps team being a little bit better. I think he's going to be brilliant. He should be the Carolina Panthers starting quarterback right now. But yeah, so Caleb Williams will be my pick. Probably Michael Penix in that. I mean, this obviously. I mean, this we talked about so many good quarterbacks. This is the best quarterback conference in the country. So so I think it's hard. I mean, you could put any one of these guys kind of in that top group and have that and like your chances.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams obviously would not shock me whatsoever, but for some of these picks, and especially as we get to the national level, I'm just going to get kind of weird with it. Like it just seems like, again, sometimes voters just want you to outdo yourself. So even if you're winning the same amount of games, even if you're angling toward conference championship game appearance, even if you're angling toward a playoff appearance, it might be something where it's put under a different, heavier microscope. Whether that's fair or not, it's probably not. Just why it seems like it's kind of a rarity that these guys go back to back, even if they don't have like a major bust of a season.
Defensive player of the year, I have Washington's Braylon Trice. He's been a disruptive player so far. I think he takes a step up, and I think in order for Washington to get to where I think they're going to be, the defense has got to take a couple steps forward, and I think they're going to do that, and a big part of the reason why is Braylon Trice is going to be like a 12, 13 sack type guy.
Yeah, double-digit sacks last year. That's a name that I went with as well. I mean, you look through it, and that sort of high-level defensive personnel for the Pac-12 is going to be really interesting this year because you had a lot of major departures, as typically is the case when guys perform at a high level. Just so many transfers, and it's just it's difficult to truly evaluate some that we just haven't seen how they play with their new teams. Obviously, there are some top-tier names like a Caleb Williams or Jordan Addison last year where it's like, okay, you know who they are because they played and did major things. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there's some name who's a first year transfer that does something huge, but Trice is someone that could again hit double-digit sacks playing for a good defense. So that's someone that at least based on his reputation deserves a little love.
All right, offensive freshman of the year. I think I got to throw it Dante Moore's way. I think he wins the job. I think he's a very talented player. He's going to have some interesting weapons for UCLA. I think he'll put up some numbers and then kind of run away with the award.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think them, even though I'm picking them right in the middle of the conference, still expect them to be, at a minimum like a 6-7 win team. He's someone who was one of, if not the top quarterback recruit in the country, especially, and I think he was the top overall recruit that signed with any Pac-12 school. So when you have those guys with that sort of recruiting pedigree, they're already on the radar to an extent. And then when you're the starting quarterback for Chip Kelly, you're going to have people that are kind of want to vote for it. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to necessarily have to. I'm not saying he's not going to have to earn it, but sometimes when some of the more obscure players come in, it's not until maybe midway 8 games in the season, like, oh, wow, well, this running back has 1,000 yards. I don't even know who he is. Okay, maybe I should start paying attention to him. He'll be on everybody's radar from day one, obviously, if he's the starter. So that could go for him, could go against him, but in a circumstance like this, I think he'll be in a position to succeed enough to win that as well.
Defensive freshman of the year, I'm going to be hard-pressed to go against Cormani McClain. He comes in as one of the top, or as the top cornerback recruit in this past class. You're learning from Deion Sanders. You're going to have a need on that defense as well. Probably going to be playing opposite Travis Hunter. So I think he's got an opportunity to make a name for himself pretty quick. And I think, being in that Colorado Deion adjacent hype machine bubble, it's going to help.
There you go. And those are the things that play in his favor. And I'm picking him as well. Again, massively talented player. I believe the top rated defensive player to sign with any Pac-12 team this past class, on the radar as well in multiple ways. Number one, because of what he is and the recruit that he was, but also Deion Sanders. So to have those things, again, like we're talking about with Moore, this is someone that people are going to be keeping an eye on from day one. If he's playing opposite Travis Hunter, he's probably going to have some teams throwing his way. So he could have some big, interception numbers and get flashy plays and do that sort of thing that people are going to be looking for when they make these sort of selections. I don't know, right or wrong. I feel like it helps some of these freshmen of the year, again, if they're a known commodity, if they're that 5-star recruit who's playing for a team that also has some hype about them. It's not always the case, but then it is. Like, ASU had Vontez Burfict. He was that guy at that time, right? So I think it helps these guys cause, because some of these other ones, they have to go through the majority of the season to really prove themselves. So those two picks to me, at least in the preseason, sound pretty logical.
Coach of the year, I'm going with the conference champs, Washington. Congrats, Kalen DeBoer.
I'm just going to do this for the heck of it. I've been debating of who I want to pick. and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound contradictory, and it's going to be for the stupidest reason possible because we already gave our breakdown. I'm going to say Deion Sanders because after he gets like the first down as Colorado's head coach, you're going to have media that are going to anoint him, the next elite head coach. So I feel like I'm just going to say that almost in jest, but I kind of want to put it on the record just to see how weird it can be because it could be a deal where if they win, I don't even know what they finished last year, 2-3 wins, something like that.
They won a game, right? They beat
Okay,
right?
There you go. Maybe I gave him too much credit. Yeah. So if they win 3 or 4 games, and if they still fall well short of bowl eligibility, but it's like, hey, the program improved this many wins,
quadrupled your win total.
Coach of the year. I feel like we probably have talked about it this way. It's an interesting concept because you almost get punished for being a good team. So now obviously there are a lot of cases. Last year was a picture perfect example where you had a couple of teams that just really excelled beyond expectations. So that was easy. But it's not always the head coach of the championship team. Sometimes it is deservedly so. Sometimes it is kind of like as a default where it's like, all right, there's nobody that's really overachieving, so let's reward him. And that's not necessarily a wrong thing to do. So naturally, I would probably say someone like Lanning in this circumstance, but I'm just going to go and be weird and say, even though I expect Colorado probably to win somewhere in the ballpark of no more than 4 games, I'm going to pick him just because that will be proof that just the hype of what people want him to be is very real.
All right. So before we outline our 4 playoff teams and national champion pick, we're going to give some love to the G5, who is going to be the New Year's 6 rep for me. It's interesting because like a bunch of the good ones, UCF, Cincinnati, maybe not BYU, but they're not officially Power 5 teams. So you can't pick them. Tulane run it back. We saw what they were able to do a season ago. But I'm going UTSA. I'm going a little under the radar. 16 starters back. Frank Harris, the quarterback there, has been there for, it feels like one of those 7-year type guys. He is a hell of a lot of fun to watch. We mentioned, of course, their offensive coordinator, Will Stein, is now at Oregon. But I still think that's going to be a very fun offense. That's been great to see the Roadrunners kind of ascend their program in recent years. Of course, ASU went there in 2016. Nikhil had that great, like, one-handed arm falling out of the end zone, touchdown catch or whatever, doing Nikhil things. But they're a really fun team now, and I think they have a chance to win the American and make a run at the New Year's 6.
I'm going to go with the same one. The options that really seem, if you're going logic and not real long shot of this, team that may not have been spectacular and top 25 team last year is really going to make a leap, but those things do happen quite a bit. Can Tulane repeat? Just a difficult thing to do. So UTSA, they had a real good season last year. I think they tapered off a little bit at the end, right? Because they're for a good chunk of the season, they were really trending toward being that Tulane as far as the one that was getting that New Year's 6 invitation. So I think that would be the next step for them.
Yeah, meep. All right, who is going to make the final 14 playoff, Joe? And then who ultimately takes the Crystal Football?
So this is where I'm just going real weird because it's kind of like I feel like I make the same teams every year, and I just kind of want to throw something stupid out there, to be honest with you. And then there are obviously some elite teams. You look at all like the major quarterbacks that are gone. So that's obviously a lot of these teams are equipped to replace them because it's been the same teams over and over and over again. But then you also have a team kind of like Clemson who's like falling off a little bit. So there can be some drop off. So I don't even know if this is possible, but this is what I'm going to predict.
All right.
So the college playoff, the 1 versus 4 game is going to be Michigan versus Ohio State, and the 2 and 3 is going to be Georgia versus Alabama. I don't know.
Discourse will be had.
So just for all the weirdness to have, obviously a heated rivalry game. Obviously, so it'll be a circumstance of like, a team with like 1 loss and other chaos going on. Oh, because even though I have Oregon win the Pac-12, it's the Pac-12, so they'll have lost 2 games at some point in the season or something like that took them out of the running. The Pac-12 is just going to eat itself up. And then, so I guess I'll say Alabama over Michigan. And I say that shrugging my arms because why not?
Yeah. At this point, it's almost chalk at this point with the 14 playoff. 12 team, I'm looking forward to that, getting some new blood in there, at least some variety in the early rounds. Anyway, I agree with 2 of your picks. Georgia and Michigan are going to make it. Then I think there's going to be some interesting internal reflection time for ASU fans because there's going to be some familiar faces in there. Mike Norvell is going to be taking the Florida State Seminoles into the playoff to get pummeled in the first round. And also, I think LSU, Jaden Daniels, going to take the Tigers to the playoff. I think Washington is probably finishing on the outside, like 5 or 6, just on the outside of getting the Pac-12 into the playoff. I don't know. Georgia probably winning it again. I don't know. It's so boring at this point.
That's why I struggle because it's like, they probably can and will do it, but I feel weird not predicting something that's be the third time again. That's kind of why I veer away from Utah, just thinking that, all right, it's difficult to do these high level things 3 times in a row.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it's always college football is the most unpredictable sport, but ultimately it's the most predictable in some ways. So we'll see how it all pans out. Shoot us your predictions. That's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest, Matt Barrie, for joining the show and giving his expertise and insight into everything. Make sure you stay with us on the social media side. We had the big announcement last week with the live show. One more to come. Still some details ironing out there, but it's going to be well worth the time, especially with this season of excitement coming up here. Lots to talk about. Going to be all off season long. Follow us on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Threads and Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Although I think Threads is kind of a ghost town now. It had its week.
I just got one to have it, and yeah, it had a good couple days, but I don't know about that one.
Yeah, but we're there, and mainly Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/SOTD Podcast, and follow me on everything at bdenny29.
And you can, of course, follow me at Joe Healy 42. And a huge thank you, as always, to our incredible sponsors, starting with DeFalco's Deli at 2334 North Scottsdale Road and DeFalco'sDeli.com. Go ahead and get yourself a meal of food there. Get on down to Cactus Sports on Mill Avenue or shop online at cactussports.com. You got to get geared up for the new year, and you can't be wearing the old duds. So you got to be rocking the new Dillingham era type of Sun Devil paraphernalia. DevilsDigest.com. Hode and all the rest. Love the work that's going on there. And that's obviously not that there's ever slow times for that, but that's going to ramp up tremendously as fall camp gets started. So if you are not a subscriber at Devil's Digest, do it now. Get one going, and you'll get a plethora of content for the foreseeable future and in perpetuity, because it just never slows down when it comes to all of that. And then, of course, our wonderful friends at Jones Auto Group. Check them out if you are in the market for a new ride, or if it's something that you even just want to consider. We can get you in contact with our guy, Parker Jones, the owner there. You've seen that they're doing a lot of good things in the Sun Devil community, getting involved with the NIL game, something pretty fierce. They've been doing that for a few years. Pretty much they've been the ones doing it since that has been a thing. So that's something that you should give your support to them. Like I said, I've referred a few friends to Jones Auto Group, and they've had wonderful experiences. So be sure to check them out when you're in the market for a new vehicle. Spaghetti Shack are wonderful friends out there. So you can get the Tempe locations going so that you can get a bucket of spaghetti. The tacos I still need to do. Been raving about them, right?
Taco Tuesday.
My goodness, a lot of options, meat and carbs. Go ahead and sign me up. Again, it's not just ASU owned and operated. It's owned and operated by a former Sparky, the Sun Devil. So check them out online at thespaghettishack.com. Follow them on social media so you can support them. And then, of course, our wonderful friends at Sun Devil Family Charities. We encourage you to check them out online at sundevilfamily.org. They are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is in place to help Sun Devils, help members of this community who face financial hardships due to medical conditions. So if you support them, you're supporting that. Obviously, that's a great cause, and we encourage you to get involved with them.
Once you're done supporting our amazing list of sponsors, make sure to drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week with our in-depth fall camp preview.